Welcome to On the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we'll be joined by Andy Koska of the Baltimore Sun to discuss all things Orioles, including the Major League roster, as well as some things going on in the minor league system, including some players who probably are getting close to the majors at this point. But before we dive into tonight's interview, we want to shout out a new member of our Patreon community, and I will turn that over to Bob.
Yeah, we got a new patron sign up at the AAA level, which is right on the cusp of the major leagues, right on the verge. Joshua Larsh, welcome to the club. Appreciate your support.
Welcome, Joshua. And tonight's guest is a writer for the Baltimore Sun covering the Orioles. He is Andy Koska. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
So we're recording on Monday night, and this is the day after the Little League Classic. So how are you feeling after yesterday's adventure on that hill in Williamsport?
Yeah, Nathan captured a pretty good video. So I learned a couple things yesterday. First off, don't go head first down the Little League hill. That was the first lesson. The second lesson was don't do it with a backpack on. Luckily, I'm talking on the laptop that was in that backpack, so it survived the fall. But, went head first, and the first bump I hit, the backpack went over my head, kind of lost my balance, did a couple flips, and, I almost pulled off a clean landing, and the backpack flipped around again, and I landed on my stomach. So it was, I survived. It was all good, and, just my ego was dented, nothing else.
I couldn't tell the difference between you and Zachary Silver's slide down the hill, pretty similar.
Yeah. Actually, Zach was pretty clean with it overall, and Nate was good. But mine, I was the guinea pig because I went first, so they had
most memorable.
They had me to thank a little bit. Yeah, it was a good time.
Zach?
It's supposed to be Bob there. I'll go.
Oh, shoot. That's my
bad. Overall, it's kind of, what was that experience like for you yourself, kind of talking with players and coaches? What did it mean to them to take part in something like that? Is there kind of, especially as they're having the season that, the Orioles are having?
Yeah. I wrote a story on, I guess it was Saturday going into Sunday, just about that was the first ESPN Sunday Night Baseball game the O's have been a part of since 2018. And a lot has changed since then, if you think about it. That was post sell-off, so, there's no Manny Machado and stuff in that lineup. Not one starting player in that lineup is still with the Orioles. With Trey Mancini was the last one that just left the deadline. So a lot has changed, not least of all the quality that's on the diamond right now. And, I think that was kind of an important thing. I talked to Spencer Watkins a little bit about, I know they don't care about what channel they play on, and that, you never want to be like, oh, yeah, we're playing on ESPN. That's so cool. Maybe, for the little leaguers, it's pretty cool. For the big leaguers, I don't think they really care that much. But there is something to be said about a nationally televised game to kind of show that, hey, the O's are legit. This is not the team of 2018, 2019, where they lost a million games. They're a winning team that's pushing for the playoffs. So, that's kind of what they wanted to show, and they did it, and I think you got out of it as well that Adley Rutschman is not just the face of the O's, but he's a rising face of baseball. He did everything yesterday. It just was, I think it was yesterday. Yeah, it was. It's been a blur. But from being in the Little League World Series booth, for a game, for an interview, talk to media, off the plane, talk to media at every turn during the game itself. He talked to us post game. He talked to on Sports Center. He's had signed all these autographs. It was so much for him, and he really lived up to the moment. So I think that was a kind of cool thing to see that he was able to go through the moment and kind of be step up to the plate a little bit, to use a cliche. But the players loved it. I think Dean Kramer kind of put it best after the game, and he said sometimes. Baseball is work, and it can feel like work. But then yesterday was one of those moments that it kind of reminds them of that, they love this game. That's what it is. It's a game, and they have a lot of fun. And I think this team, more so than many teams, has a lot of fun, all the time, even in the monotony of, road series where they go, 3 city road trips, whatever. They're still having fun. But yesterday was a pretty cool way for everybody to have a lot of fun and connect with a lot of fans that kind of idolize them.
Yeah, that's a good point about Adley. I mean, if it wasn't enough that he's like put himself right in contention for Rookie of the Year, yesterday definitely cemented the fact that he's like one of the big up and coming talents for the game. But back to the Orioles as a whole, there's obviously a balancing act going on right now where the Orioles are in contention, but with their eyes still in the future, trying to develop guys. You wrote about that after DL Hall's debut a couple weekends ago. Can you expand on how you see it playing out at the majors the rest of the way?
Yeah, it's funny that the DL Hall thing was super interesting to me. Just I didn't see we heard the start, everything like that. We knew it was coming up, but I didn't see so much the immediate send down. I thought it was going to kind of stick around. But I mean, the way the Orioles see it, it's a way for them to kind of develop him for this stretch run in September. Really is, I think, where they see him coming back up as a reliever. Get another kind of flamethrowing lefty. He and Perez, that's going to be interesting out of the bullpen with those two lefties. But it is kind of this balancing act where, here they are, 2.5. I didn't check the standings, who else is playing today, but, entering today, they were 2.5 games back of the final wild card space. They have an opportunity to go for it. I think Mike Elias has changed his tune. When he traded Lopez and Trey, the initial thing he said was like, we can make the playoffs, but it's maybe not the best probability we make the playoffs. And even if we make the playoffs, we're probably not going to win very much in the playoffs. And then he quickly kind of changed his tune to like, hey, I believe in this team. I think he, tweaked the language just a little bit. That helped a little bit in the clubhouse too, that like this team has an opportunity here. And it's such a fine balancing act where, you don't want to call up prospects to have them sit on the bench. You want them starting, but you also don't really want to mess with a good thing. And I feel like that's the place they're in right now with, I've said it before. I see you call up Gunnar Henderson. He plays third. Ramon Urias plays second, and Jorge Mateo plays shortstop. But there's a lot to it that, maybe the numbers don't exactly show, but with Rougned Odor, I mean, he brings a lot to this team. And I know, the defensive stats on paper with, runs saved above average, things like that. They don't look amazing, but there's sort of like some intangible stuff that when you talk to players in the clubhouse, when you talk to Brandon Hyde, they just can't stop raving about what Odor brings, steadying presence. When, I don't know if you've noticed, but like every single time there's a mound visit, Odor is running in there and giving his 2 cents too, because he's been around. He knows, he has tidbits of knowledge that he wants to, impart on pitchers. And, even if it's just like, hey man, good luck, things like that go a long way sometimes. And I think, so you don't necessarily want to mess with a good thing. But they do have an opportunity with, for example, bringing up Kyle Stowers, and sending Brett Phillips down to AAA. That's an opportunity where, he is going to be in the lineup most days. You're going to have to kind of mix up the batting order to make sure that he's in the lineup, because you don't want a top prospect like Kyle Stowers sitting on the bench. But he can also help you. Because if their offense was, kind of teetering, and then he shows up and not a direct correlation, but they score 15 runs and they looked, pretty good yesterday, in Williamsport, where I think he struck out like 3 times. So it wasn't him, but like you just add another, lefty bat to a lineup that has some pop. So I think those are the things you have to juggle is, can you get a top prospect up and can he make an immediate impact, because you just don't want him to sit on the bench. And we're going to see that with, when DL comes up, how frequently is he going to pitch? What is that going to look like? When Gunnar Henderson comes up, and that's a, ticking, the clock is ticking. It's going to be soon. You feel like, where does he kind of slide into this, lineup? And you see like him experimenting at other positions, in AAA this week or last week. And, that's kind of, that kind of plays into it, where it's, you want his bat in the lineup and you don't necessarily know where it might be in the field, but you don't want to just say like, okay, congrats, this 21-year-old is going to play third base every single day, when you have kind of established veterans that are, winning at the major league level. You might have to figure out things a little bit, I guess, tightrope it a little bit, where, you know, maybe he slides in at second. I don't know what they do, but it's going to be interesting to see. And, you know, next season is really going to take off, as Michael Lyles said. But this year, I think if they do it correctly with bringing up some of these guys at key moments and making sure that they are actually playing frequently, it could be the double effect of, yeah, they're getting major league experience and they're also helping the ball club win and push toward the playoffs.
Yeah, they're trying to thread the needle. And is that part of that balancing act with Stowers? Like, we thought as soon as Mancini was traded, you'd see Stowers come up right away. They waited a couple weeks, which I know Orioles fans were frustrated by, but is that part of that, you think, just trying to figure out where to slot him in and get him enough at bats?
Yeah, you know, I think initially it might have been some just like kind of figure out where this team was a little bit. You get Brett Phillips, who, you know, what kind of was, it almost felt like Brett Phillips was more so than just his, more so than what he brings to the field. And he brings great defense, good base running, not the best bat, but, you know, he's a great clubhouse guy. And when you lose a guy like Trey, there could have been a little bit of like, hey, this guy knows what to do in a clubhouse. He's a vet. You know, he's going to be good for a little bit, just to help this clubhouse not get over, but like, you know, kind of weather the storm of like, holy fright, we don't have our longest tenured Oriole in the clubhouse suddenly, you know? So I think that probably played a little bit into it. And then when you figured out the clubhouse was doing fine, then Kyle Stowers comes up and he's going to play a little bit more of an active role. It is interesting with, you know, just, you know, Santander playing more DH likely is going to be the answer. I love the outfield, honestly, of Stowers, Mullins, and Hayes. You know, that's quite a good outfield just defensively, and with Santander at DH. I mean, that's a pretty good order you have right there. But then it gets weird when you have Rutschman needs a day off. You need his bat in the lineup, so he's going to be a DH. Then I guess you put Santander in the outfield because he's been hitting like crazy, so you want him out there. That probably bumps Stowers. So there's going to be, you know, he's not going to be the everyday player immediately, but he's going to be in there more frequently than not. And that's just, again, one of those balance things that they got to figure out. And they're going to figure it out, and it'll work out, you know, most likely. But they're doing a pretty good job of it the first week that he's been here, of getting him in the lineup and getting him those at-bats that he needs.
Going back to some of the players like Odor, it feels like for an analytically driven front office, Michael Lyles and his regime do place at least some importance on veteran leadership and clubhouse chemistry. And do you think that keeping players like Odor and Robinson Chirinos on the roster all year, despite what Orioles Twitter may feel about this, could help explain them outperforming expectations and being in the playoff hunt right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super easy for fans to, when they're not in the clubhouse every day, to point fingers and say, oh, look what Robinson is batting. Look what Odor is batting. You know, of course, Odor is phenomenal in clutch situations. He seems like he turns into a different player when it's a high leverage situation sometimes. But what they bring with, you know, just different traditions, you know, they're the ones that, you know, Odor, you know, got the home run chain going. They added disco lights to the clubhouse now. You know, they have a smoke machine after wins. It's like you walk into that clubhouse after a win, it's like a club. You know, it's like you just walked into like, it's unbelievable. It's like, you know, someone passed me a Miller Lite. You know, it's like, what are we doing? You know, it's like, I'm not here to interview somebody. Let's start dancing. Like it's a different vibe, and that's honestly huge with Robbie and Rugi. I mean, that's what they do, and I think it's very easy to, you know, point fingers and say like, okay, they're not carrying their weight analytically or, you know, with the batting average and stuff, but you ask anyone on that roster. I just asked Tyler Nevin the other day about, like, you know, he was here for a tiny bit, like 7 games or something last year, but like just from his perspective of like what's different, you know, what's he noticed. And I think the first he mentioned the bullpen, which fair, yeah, very different. And then the second thing he said was having Robinson, Chirinos, and Rugen Odor in that clubhouse is a huge difference. And Jordan Lyles in there too, you know, can't forget about him. So having those veteran presences, you know, are really important for this team right now when you have a lot of young guys and when you have a leader like that. And, Yeah, they might not be performing at a high level on the field, but in the clubhouse, they're performing at a heck of a high level.
Love it. Love the insight there. Important context, important things to remember as fans, I think, too. But talking about Jorge Mateo, this is a guy who I remember we had Kyle Glazer on last year, and he was like, yeah, that's a guy you cut. He's a nobody. And I was always never the biggest fan of Jorge Mateo. And last time you were on, I think you had just written a lot about the work that he was doing with Ryan Fuller and Matt Borg-Schulte, and he was starting to improve a little bit at the plate. But we know this year the defense has been excellent all year, and now he's really starting to break out the plate. He's been a phenomenal hitter over these last few weeks. Do you think these improvements are sustainable? And if so, where do you see his future being in this organization with Gunnar coming up and Jordan Westberg knocking on the door and some of these other guys knocking on the door as well?
Yeah. I know Nathan Ruiz pointed out the other day that Mateo's F-WAR is the same as Carlos Correa right now. So, it's funny, I think last time I came on the show, I was on the Mateo hype train before it had even started boarding or leaving the station. And I, feel a little validated that I was like, yeah, okay, I'll count on that, because since July 4, he's hitting 301, so he's getting on base, and he's, a lot of power in that, he's speedy as heck and a lot of power too. So what he brings is an electric, player basically that, is going to make great plays in defense, can put himself into scoring position. And if he keeps coming through in big spots like he has been, there's a lot to like, and I don't know what the future holds. I don't think anyone really does, but you see at the minimum, I would see him as a kind of super utility player that you can bring in off the bench. If they want to make a splash at shortstop and get, somebody this offseason, a big money shortstop, he can play all sorts. He can play all over the outfield and the left side of the infield, probably second base too. So that's a plus. He can be that guy, but he's also showing, like, I wouldn't be shocked, like, if he proves himself as a guy that can be, the guy for at least another season. Give him a shot next season. See if these 2 months are, kind of a sign of who he is instead of just a purple patch, which I guess is like a soccer term. I don't know if you know what that means, but like a good patch of play. I just wrote a story, I think like last week or when I was in Tampa, about what the difference is with Mateo since July 4 to now. And a lot of it is because he just saw a steady diet of sliders away and two seamers in on the hands in batting practice. And so the whole point was, like, he didn't know which pitch was coming at which point, and he had to lay off the slider away and swing at the two seamer. So that was obviously pretty difficult, to constantly do that. But seeing all those, he really made a huge amount of improvements in the cage. He brought it to the field, and his chase rate is down in the last 2 months. His strikeout rate is down in the last 2 months. So those are, probably the biggest things that have improved for Jorge Mateo, just offensively. And, if he can do that, not chase as much as he was in the beginning of the season, I think he has a legitimate claim to be the starting shortstop next season. But you never know with things. I mean, if the O's have an opportunity to make a big splash and they feel like it's the right opportunity, they're going to go for it, and they'll find a spot for Jorge Mateo somewhere, even if it's coming off the bench. But I think he's deserved a look at the very least.
For sure.
You definitely made me a believer. I was not. And then I think you came on, and you started the hype train. And then we had some of our patrons, shout out to you guys as well, that were like, Mateo is a dude. And I'm like, all right, let me give him a chance. And I did. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah. The best sign for me is that his strikeout rate is only like 20.5% since July 4th as well, which is a big time improvement from where it was in the first 3 months of the year. So if he can keep that down, I think that's going to go a long way. But it sure seems like we're gearing up for an imminent Gunnar Henderson promotion announcement. When do you see that happening? And, for a while we thought Jordan Westberg would be the first guy out of those two to make it to the majors. But at this point, do you see him getting a shot to make his major league debut down the stretch?
Gunnar or Jordan? Sorry.
Jordan for the second part. Sorry.
I'll answer the second part first. Jordan, I don't necessarily see a promotion to the big leagues this season. Not that he's not hitting great. He's playing good defense. Honestly, he's a better. You never really know. I don't watch the games as closely as you guys, so for the minor leagues. So you guys can correct me, but he might be a more steady defender than Gunnar is, especially in the middle infield. Gunnar can make tremendous plays, though. I mean, he's quite an athlete, So there's always both are very good defenders, but I think I might see the future for Jordan in the middle infield and Gunnar more at third base, but that could just, I don't. You guys can pitch in it if you guys don't really see it that way, but yeah, I don't. I think Jordan might be blocked. His immediate path to the big leagues this season might be blocked, but you never know with September. When it rolls around, they might see a need. Who knows exactly what shakes out if there's an injury. Who knows? So he could get an opportunity. He's definitely proven himself as a capable AAA player, and they always talk about graduating a level, and they being Lyles and kind of the brain trust, and he's certainly getting close to that. I don't know the exact benchmarks. For instance, when Adley Rutschman was nearing a debut, his benchmark was, can you catch 3 days in a row and survive it, basically. And once he did that, he was called up. He had an off day, then was called up the next day. So that was his benchmark. With Gunnar, it looks like they're testing him a little bit at some other positions. Maybe that is part of the benchmark of hey, how versatile can you be defensively? That could be part of it. So I don't know exactly what the benchmarks are for Jordan Westburg, but his path could be a little bit more treacherous up here, just because it seems like Brandon Hyde especially loves Odor at second. Urias can play second as well. Mateo is pretty much locked down the shortstop spot every day. And that leaves third base likely as the opening for Gunnar, because that's probably the likeliest place he'll move into. But I don't technically know. I mean, that's just kind of conjecture, I guess, on my part. But to answer your thing about Gunnar, I mean, he could be. I wouldn't be shocked if tomorrow he's up, because tomorrow he has 44 days of service time if he gets called up tomorrow, and then he'll still be rookie eligible then for next season's. If he makes the opening day roster next season, then they get a draft pick. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. I think so. So, and Mike Elias loves his draft picks. So once once Gunnar kind of still has that rookie eligibility for next season, I think, it's definitely a chance where Gunnar kind of can come up whenever they feel he's ready. Played once at first base last week, played once at second base, which I think was his first start in the minor leagues at second base ever. He played a game there once, moved over there later, but that was his first start at first or second. They're just kind of seeing, how versatile can he be? Is he a guy that they can say, hey, Mountcastle needs a day off, let's throw Gunnar at first for a day, and then we can keep, we don't need to do a crazy reshuffle. Or, we just pop him in and keep his bat in the lineup. Who knows? Who knows exactly what they want? I think he's capable of playing anywhere, but with a top prospect like him, you kind of want to probably dictate to where he plays best, and it's probably on the left side of the infield, third base or short. So yeah, we'll see exactly, but it's imminent. Whenever Gunnar could come up, it's definitely soon, most likely this season, if not by the end of this month. So we'll see.
I think you were spot on with your defensive scouting report there. I think we would agree.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I agree as well. As the season has gone on, I think that we've been hearing a lot from our listeners, why did the guys start off in low A? Last year we saw some players make the jump from low A to double A. This year we've seen some aggressive moves from high A to double A, and all of them have essentially paid off. And yet with triple A, it feels like a guy will have good numbers over a large sample size and maybe not get that call up when everyone is expecting. Do you think that it's maybe a situation where the Orioles know that benchmark should be higher to get from the AAA to the majors than it should be from high A to double A? Or do you think that it's maybe a little bit of kind of reaction to seeing a player who is as highly talented as Kyle Stowers or Gunnar Henderson performing well at AAA and wanting them as quickly in the majors as possible?
Yeah, I think it's natural for even reporters to look at AAA numbers and say, wow, they have an 850 OPS. Like, what are they doing playing in Norfolk when they could be in Baltimore? I like to think that the O's I know they have more inside knowledge than I do on what their prospects are doing on the dailies. So I think that they like to, really make sure they don't. One thing that has stood out to me about, one thing Michael Lyles said previously, and I'll get back in a second about the high A to double A in a second, but he said, they don't want to have a guy come up, struggle, and then have to send him back down. And of course they did that with Dia Hall, but that was a different circumstance in that they wanted to change his role, and they weren't going to put him in throw him in the bullpen suddenly in the major leagues, when he's never really done that before. So that one, fine. They got his feet wet was the, reasoning, and then he can change his role in the minors. Most of the time though, they don't want, let's use Adley Rutschman as an example. They wanted to make sure he was really ready. He was overly ready, but they really wanted to make sure he's ready because you don't want him to struggle so much that you had to send him back down and kind of crush his confidence a little bit. So that was, I think, most of the reasoning why they might pump the brakes a little extra. And there's a lot less pressure when you're going from high A to double A. Fewer eyes. If you struggle in double A, it's not the worst thing on the planet if you get sent back down to high A, although it's not, it's not great, but it's not as in the spotlight maybe as it would be if you're a major leaguer going back down to AAA. So there's differences there, just in the way of, how they, I think, view the different levels of promotions. They definitely slow play the AAA to major league promotions, but that's not exactly surprising. Just in terms of, wanting to be overly ready, and especially, I think it was easier maybe when they were on pace to lose 100 games to have a guy come up and struggle and say like, oh, he's going to struggle and get through this, and then he's going to be better because of it. And now you're in the midst of winning games, and this is kind of part of that balance thing too, where like you really want to make sure he's ready and he's going to come up and actually impact this team in a positive way, because you have to expect that there's going to be a learning curve always, but you can't have so much of a learning curve that it's a detriment to the team as a whole. So it's a fine balance, and I think it's a little maybe easier to go from high A to double A, even though no jump in levels is easy, but it may be just with less of a spotlight that they feel like, hey, we're more willing to make a risk from high A to double A compared to triple A to major leagues.
You try to avoid the Jared Kelenic situation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Looking ahead a little bit, Michael Lyles' recent comments with some of the quotes that he's had out there about blue skies ahead, liftoff, and we plan to significantly increase payroll this offseason are unusual for him in the sense of setting expectations for the upcoming offseason. How do you see things playing out? Because it does feel like there are so many different directions this team can go in between the end of this season and the start of the 2023 season.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been sitting here like pondering that myself. I see, that was the most definitive Michael Lyles has ever been since being here in some sort of like direction of where the organization is on a whole. I don't think he's ever been, and of course I'm newer than Nathan Ruiz, my beat partner, so he probably would be able to answer that with a little bit more guarantee in his voice than I think that's about as 100% like this is where we are, like we're taking the next step that he's been. It's good to hear for an O's fan, I'm sure. It's good to hear as a reporter because I'm going to be covering an exciting team. So it's interesting that he kind of put those expectations on, the team. And I think there's definitely a sense that, it's going to be a free agent, like a lot of free agents in the market. It could be a way that it could be a sense that they make a splash and even move, like, who knows, maybe Carlos Correa plays second base next year for the Baltimore Orioles. I don't know. It's like they could do something like that if they want to keep Mateo at shortstop because he's the better defender, whatever might happen, but they could make a splash like that. But again, I talk about it all the time, like this balance and finding a fine line of you have all these prospects that are knocking on the door. You want to find spaces for them. Next year, if things work out, you have a rotation of John Means, Dio Hall, Grayson Rodriguez, Tyler Wells probably in there. And then you have a fifth spot that's up for grabs. So is that fifth spot Jordan Lyles? Do you keep him around because he's such a veteran presence? Do you make a splash and really go get a top of the line starter? Maybe that's one of the ways they go. Maybe they trust Dean Kramer so much because of what he's showing lately that he earns that fifth spot. There's a lot of different directions they could go, and I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't spend crazy amounts of money and they really just kind of lock down the arbitration guys they have. Maybe sign some extensions and trust that, hey, we built internally here. We only need to go and get like one or two guys. We don't need to do a huge, huge revamp here. That's the way I'm kind of leaning. Is the latter of they're not really going to make that much a splash. You can play this back when they sign 15 players, and I'm like, oh wow, okay. But it's I don't think it'll be that crazy overall of how hard they go because they have a lot of talent coming up, and guys like Taron Vavra is he could be a really nice bench piece where I don't know if you want to kind of close off his playing time by necessarily getting another veteran in the group. You have guys that Ryan McKenna is a good fourth outfielder lately. You don't know what his ceiling might be, but he's playing really well right now. Like, do you go? They're not going to go get another outfielder, but there's always that consideration of you have these guys that they could blossom into more. They've been consistently good. Do you kind of stick by them? And so that's going to be very fascinating this offseason. That's one of the more interesting things, and it makes the winter meetings especially interesting of just what direction they go. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be trades in there. They might trade for a starter with team control. Use some of this. Who knows? Maybe they package a guy like Jordan Westburg and say, let's go get some really good starter. You don't know. They'll make those decisions, but it could go so many ways. And I'm now just throwing out every option and hoping I hit the dartboard. But it's definitely an interesting offseason, and yeah, Mike Elias has at least signaled that things are starting to. He's hitting the accelerator.
Speaking of one of those guys, you mentioned Jordan Lyles there, and I think he's been a pretty pleasant surprise for this organization. The veteran leadership has played a major role in all of this. We know a lot of the pitchers look up to him. Obviously not knowing where they could go, like you mentioned, we could trade for a starter with control. You could spend some money in free agency on a pitcher. But at the same time, if you're looking at Rodriguez, Hall, Kramer, probably a large group of young pitchers coming back again next year fighting for those 5 spots, do you think that picking up that $11 million club option is a viable option?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. 11 million is a lot for a guy that has been incredibly reliable, but maybe not, as wow. I don't know. It's entirely possible that his reliability, because he's on the mound every 5th day, and you can trust him to go deep into outings. I mean, he's had some shorter outings here and there, but you can pretty much trust him to go 6, I suppose, is what he wants to go, 6+. But sometimes 5, just with the way things work out, it's 3rd time through an order. But he's been a huge pleasant surprise, and I think what he brings, just like we talked about Ruby and Robinson earlier, what he brings in the clubhouse is, almost indispensable with some of the guys. I mean, Tyler Wells picks that guy's brain 24/7. They're constantly talking about different things. He has a way that he understands what this is, and I think a lot of the guys respect what he's done in this league. I mean, you're not in the league for a decade by accident, like he's doing something right, so a lot of guys kind of flock toward that, and that is definitely an interesting conundrum that the O's might find themselves in. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe decline the option, but then bring him back on a different contract. That could be the way to go. I don't know exactly what they'll do, but definitely 11 million is on the steeper side. But I think there's definitely a place for Jordan Lyles in this clubhouse, and they like what he brings, and I think for good reason.
Yeah. So if the impossible does happen and the Orioles do make the expanded playoff field, what would that mean for a team that has been the laughingstock of the sport from 2018 to about, I don't know, a couple months ago?
Yeah. I think it would be in, big neon letters, like, hey, like, watch out. Like, I think a lot of people still maybe don't want to realize that the Orioles are above 500 on August 22. They're not going to lose 100 games this season. That's confirmed. If they lose every single game, it's 99. And it's funny, the preseason prediction in the Baltimore Sun that I had was 63-99 was what I put. And so I was off. I was way off. Well, I could be right. I could still be right, but you never know. I think, it's definitely a sign, though, that if they make the playoffs, in baseball, I mean, anything can happen. Like, I wouldn't even put it past, like, you don't know what happens in a wild card series. Something crazy could happen. Jordan Lyles goes 4 innings, then you have DL Hall for 2, then you have, CNL, Bautista, crazy things can happen. And it's funny just that it's even a possibility this season. A lot has to go right for them to make the playoffs. But the fact they're in it is a good thing. I think it builds confidence for next season, if nothing else. And it's good experience for these young guys to experience the pressure of a playoff run. Figuring out how to balance, like, looking at the standings every day compared to not looking at it at all. What works best for them? Brandon Hyde, he's been through this before with Chicago. He knows what playoff races are like. He checks the standings every day. But other guys that might get in their head. They might not want to check the standings every day. And this is a season that they're going to learn that. And I think that really can't, be overstated, just the value of learning something like that. It could pay big dividends, next season and beyond.
Yeah, I could see a Tyler Wells, Grayson Rodriguez, Jordan Lyles playoff rotation doing some damage. But next question is, who's going to win Most Valuable Oriole, and why is it Chris Holt?
Well, he's actually, he's done a great job this season. Adley Rutschman's going to win it. The funny thing is that there's a lot of different ways you could go with Most Valuable Oriole. There's been a lot of, I would argue that Jorge Mateo has a claim. Like, just with the defense and what you're getting as a 9-hole hitter. Excuse me, as a 9-hole hitter most of the time, that's been a big improvement. But it's Adley Rutschman. 3 months ago yesterday is when he got called up, and they are like 13 games over 500 since he got called up, something like that. I forget the exact, number on the record, but it's a different ball club since Adley Rutschman arrived. The pitching staff loves working with him. He has, he's definitely one of those guys that, makes people around him better. And I think, even if he, isn't having his best offensive day, the fact that, like, other people around him are playing well, that's gonna make him feel fine. So definitely Adley would be my pick for MVP or MVO, I guess it would be. And not MVP of the league. I mean, like, for the Orioles, he would be for let's make that one clear. But it's definitely been a difference maker in what this team has been able to do since May 21, I guess it was, I think. So yeah, that's who I'd pick. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned it with Chris Holt. They've done a great job of, tweaking things with analytics too. Austin Voth has talked a lot about since he's arrived. From the Nationals, that just the analytics has helped him kind of rebound his season with knowing where to pitch, when to pitch, things like that. He's added a sweeper to his mix. That was, Chris Holt idea. Spencer Watkins added a slider. That was another Chris Holt idea. Those two pitches for those guys, they play off curveballs. They're just another weapon against righties. And, Spencer said, he's not yet comfortable really with that back foot slider that could be so dangerous against a lefty. But as soon as he kind of develops that, probably in the offseason, he'll have more time to really develop a back foot slider against a lefty. That's a great pitch in his arsenal that just, works against, both sides of the plate. So there's a lot that Chris Holt has done in the pitching department. It's a lot, Chris Holt's the name on it, but there's a lot of guys that work in that pitching department that deserve credit too. And, it's Adley Rutschman, I think, is in that mix of what he's just been able to do with learning a pitching staff so quickly because he missed spring training.
Yeah, it's interesting context because Adley really did miss valuable time with spring training. We talked about this last week after your colleague Nathan Ruiz wrote a really good piece in the Baltimore Sun, kind of looking at Rutschman in the context of the Rookie of the Year race. Yeah. I know Rutschman's your pick for most valuable Oriole right now, but where would you see him in the AL Rookie of the Year race if you had to make that decision?
Yeah, it's either him or the guy in Seattle. Of course, I'm blanking on his name.
Julio.
Julio Rodriguez. Thank you. It's one of those two. I think. Speaking of the devil, I get a text from Nathan. He said everything I said is wrong. I'm joking. No, he didn't say that. But no, it's I think Adley has a definite claim for Rookie of the Year. It's a weird thing. Like I don't vote for Rookie of the Year for multiple reasons, but like the fact that voting for Rookie of the Year has like salary implications and stuff, and how much service time, that is a kind of weird thing just from my position. Like having that kind of control over a player is not, I don't think, the media's job at all. So that's a weird thing for me. That's an aside though. But I think Adley would be the Rookie of the Year just in terms of how there is such a stark difference between this team on May 20th compared to May 21st. And I think a lot of those awards should be, a lot of the time it's given to, like Mike Trout gets it and he's absolutely deserving when he got it, but again, his team kind of underperformed in all those seasons. And I think a lot has to be given to how does a player elevate the entire team? Do they make the entire team better? And I think in Adley's case, absolutely yes. They've turned into a playoff contender, since July, like one of the best records in baseball. It's been interesting to see, but I think he definitely has a huge case. And I mean, his offensive, he also has a case for being the best catcher in baseball, period. Just with his defensive stats are all top 10 across the board, and his pitch framing is unbelievable. And his, if you saw it in the fifth inning last night with the two strikeouts, I forget who it was. I know one was Klawecki. Somebody, I forget who it was, but the last two strikeouts of the fifth inning, both were off the plate, and he great pitch framing jobs, and his offensive stats are like top 3 for catchers. So he's already made a case for best catcher in baseball. He's a 24-year-old who's been up for 81 games he's played, I think. I think he's the Rookie of the Year, but who knows? We'll see what everything shakes out to be.
Moving on to the player that was the consensus number 2 prospect coming into this season, Grayson Rodriguez. Obviously, he's missed a lot of time with that lat injury. Reports are now that he is rehabbing down in Sarasota. Do you think it's realistic that he could be added to the roster in time to possibly be postseason eligible if the Orioles get there? Or do you think it's more likely we see a gradual buildup where best case scenario, he's back on the mound at Norfolk for the tail end of their season, and 2023 is when we see him in the majors?
I wouldn't be shocked if he's in the majors by the end of this season. He's making a lot of progress down there. Feels great. This whole time he's been pretty adamant that he's thought it was a cramp. When it first happened, he didn't think it was that big of a deal. So it's definitely he's coming back strong, and I think the O's are kind of seeing that every bullpen session that he throws is coming. The reports are coming back well. He's throwing a sim game this week. I think the progression is there. It wouldn't shock me if he returns to AAA and they don't risk it. He's a big talent that they want to have ready for 2023. But I would be, I was actually like wondering. I kind of wondered to myself, like, could he technically be a bullpen piece, for this team? Kind of like would they do a DL Hall? But I would I think it's less likely probably that he goes the DL Hall route of the bullpen, and he would be a starter, be that in AAA, or he could be a late addition to the rotation this season. I truly do not put it out of the realm of possibility that he's a Baltimore Oriole by the end of this season.
Love it. Considering I was convinced, you can't unconvince me that that inning he got injured in, that was the last inning he was going to pitch in AAA to get called up. But unfortunate timing there. But another minor league question here is some of the guys, Colton Cowser, Connor Norby, Joey Ortiz, a lot of guys making big noise down there in AA right now. But since the pandemic, we've seen this shift in the minor league schedule where they've got this staggered finish. Do you have any insight into maybe some possible Orioles plans for, all right, Norfolk still goes on for 2 more weeks after Bowie's over? Seeing some of these guys make that jump for that cup of coffee right at the end of the year is a nice reward.
Honestly, I had not even considered that until you just said it. I hadn't thought that far ahead about the possibilities, but I definitely wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility. I think there's definitely a huge benefit to some of those guys getting at bats at the AAA level, even if it's 2 weeks of at bats. That's probably where they're going to wind up, very out of spring training next year, or very quickly they'll rise from AA to AAA. So there could be a sense of, let's get some at bats in there. But yeah, honestly, I hadn't even thought of that until 5 seconds ago. But it's a good point, and Cowser definitely is in that mix for, I wouldn't expect it anytime soon, but maybe towards the end of the year, they would kind of see him as a guy that could definitely go up, and he technically could go up sooner with the way he's been playing, but we'll see. But that is definitely a good point, and I think we'll see a bunch of guys make that jump from AA to AAA. Yeah, I hadn't really considered that before now.
Yeah, we saw a little bit with Gunnar Henderson last year. It was only like the last week of the Bowie season he got some playoff experience, and maybe that helped him jumpstart his offseason routine before his breakout year this year. But my last question is, who is the biggest success story between Dean Kramer, Spencer Watkins, and Austin Voth?
Is all of the above an answer? I won't say Dean, because I think this was always kind of a possibility. I think this was a very known commodity that he had this stuff, and it just was a case of, can he be healthy, and can he, find a consistency? And he's pitching great right now. Last night he had his 5-pitch arsenal, and I think he threw everything, within 5 pitches of each other. He was so evenly across the board on this 5-pitch arsenal that was crazy. So he's been pitching great. The biggest success story of Spencer Watkins or Austin Voth, I think just the circumstances around Austin Voth would push him ahead. Spencer has pitched great. He's put himself from the position of, I think Spencer Watkins was kind of a fringe guy that you didn't know what he was going to become, 28, 29, whatever, you don't exactly know. And he's proven himself as, a legitimate starter in this rotation, and that can't be overstated. And, he has a shot at being in this rotation next year, if not out of the bullpen. He could also be a long guy. But Austin Voth was a guy that I don't want to say this in a way that's demeaning to Austin Voth, but technically they junk picked him. He had a 13 ERA and was released on waivers. He is 100% the success story of the season, that the Orioles proved that they could take a cast off from somebody else and prove him and turn him into a legitimate starter. And the circumstances had to line up well with, he had to fill in, for an injury there, and now hasn't lost his place, his place in that rotation. The way that the sweeper has really added a lot to his game, just in terms of, he has a deadly curveball, but adding then a sweeper where it's a little bit more, that's more of the swing and miss pitch, where he can place the curveball for soft contact in the zone, but then if he wants kind of a swing and miss, he can then throw that sweeper off the plate. We haven't seen him a lot of it. I think he threw 10 of them on Saturday. That was his most this season. So we'll see more of that as the season goes on. But he is, I mean, he's a completely different pitcher than he was in the beginning of the season. The experiment as a one inning guy for the Nationals completely failed. That's not him. That's not. He's a long guy. He's really a starter. He wants to be a starter. That's what he's used to. And I think that's the story. That's really the reclamation project of the season is turning Austin Voth into a pretty legit starter. And you look at him and you're like, okay, what's his future? Because you have all these young arms that you're kind of like, how do they all kind of fit together into a rotation and bullpen next season? But I think he's a guy that you probably want to keep a hold of, be it in AAA and you need a spot starter here or there, or a long relief, or maybe he continues this and proves that he's a fifth guy. But I think he wins of those three, he wins.
Yeah, I think Orioles fans are used to our cast-offs going somewhere else and finding success, not the other way around.
Yeah. That is probably a nice thing to see one of those work. But a lot of waiver claims have worked. I mean, this season's the season of the waiver claims becoming kind of molding into these full-on bullpen arms that are dominant to I guess starters with a couple of these guys like Tyler Wells and Austin Voth. So
I think for me, it's this organization can develop pitching. So when you see some of these pitchers, maybe you have this big group of guys who project as number 5 starters in the major league level. Well, look at what they've done with guys like Austin Voth and Spencer Watkins, and maybe you got some diamonds in the rough down there in the minor leagues as well. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, well, if you think about Felix Bautista, I mean, he was, give it two years ago, he was a completely unknown commodity. Last year, he was, fairly unknown until he, rapid rise to AAA, and then here he is, the closer with Omar's whistle, the Omar whistle, to welcome onto the field. So there are definitely, some diamonds in the rough, and I think the O's are finding them, and Bautista is a good example. Austin Voth's a good example. We'll see who else, shows up, but definitely, I mean, yeah, the organization can develop pitching, and I think they so frequently draft college hitters, pretty highly in the draft. Obviously Jackson Holliday is the high schooler in that mix, but a little bit of exception there. But I think they don't necessarily need to spend a huge amount of draft capital on pitchers because they feel confident that they can develop a guy and tweak his stuff and do basically make him into what they envision for him instead of having to draft a guy that is pre-made, I guess, if that makes sense.
I have one more question, and it kind of builds off this discussion about the pitching staff, which is where do you see Kyle Bradish in this mix right now? He's had some ups and downs in the majors this year, had the injury stint, and he's come off the IL and has been solid but not quite dominant. And I would say that maybe his outing this past weekend over the Red Sox, you kind of saw the best and worst of Kyle Bradish in the majors this year in that start. So do you see him right now in the 2023 rotation mix? And what would he, if not, what would he have to do to get there?
Yeah, that's an incredibly tough question. I think I never like to put caps on guys because I don't know how things are going to shake out, but he definitely is kind of on the maybe a little bit more on the outside looking in at this point on a 2023 rotation spot, and that doesn't mean that he's not going to absolutely nail one down in spring training or he finishes the last month of this season, last month and a half of this season in terrific form. And, not, 9 hits against Boston or whatever it was he gave up, so not the, didn't miss many bats, but, kept the runs low. I think it was 3. So, it was a decent outing, just was, kind of ran into some trouble here and there. He's been an interesting guy, just with the way, he started. He had that, 11 strikeout game against St. Louis. You think holy fright, he's going to come in and not need any, learning curve. But the reality is, this is going to be the way it is for when Grayson Rodriguez comes up. It's the way it is. Not everyone comes up and is Steven Strasburg striking out 14 or whatever on their debut. That's not the way a lot of things work out with a starting pitcher, especially. it's tough, to be a starting pitcher and learn how to pitch the third time through a rotation or through an order, excuse me. That's the biggest challenge. And you see, Jordan Lyles even has trouble doing that. And, Dean Kramer, kind of ran into a little bit of trouble there, in the sixth inning before he got, the early pull last night. So that's going to be an interesting thing of how does he develop in terms of, kind of missing more bats, not walking people. If he can kind of do those two things a little bit more frequently, work deeper into outings. He doesn't need to strike out 11 a game, to be a dominant pitcher. But I'm sure the O's would take it. They wouldn't say no to that. But, I think he has the stuff that can work to work more efficiently. Drawing swings on borderline pitches would be a huge thing. He has a couple mistake pitches a game, it feels like, where they get punished. Everyone has a mistake pitch here and there, but you want to minimize them as much as possible. And so I think he's still kind of in that, in between spot of, he's learning as a rookie and it's difficult to be a rookie. And, people were hyped for DL Hall to come up and you saw in that second inning, I think it was, where he strikes out the side. And that's electrifying. But then he also walks a bunch of guys, and gives up some runs. So I think that's just the way it's going to be for most of the pitchers who come up. And he's kind of in a rocky stretch. But hey, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And he definitely is a promising prospect, but he's going to have to find a little bit more consistency to be in the rotation next year. But he can do it. He's got a month and a half to kind of show what he did against Boston. Maybe not give up as many hits as he did against Boston, but if you can go work into the sixth inning with 3 runs or fewer, you're doing pretty well.
The good news with Bradish is he's got the good stuff that he could come in and be a multi-inning reliever like Keegan Aiken this year, or even eventually be a closer type or a high leverage reliever with his stuff. So if it doesn't work out in the rotation, he's got other options as well. Yeah,
definitely. There's a lot of ways, they can go with this, and it's probably a good problem to have so many options. So I think, I think the O's appreciate that they have a headache on their hand of what to do with all these guys.
So before we move into our final segment of the night, where Bob, Nick, and Andy is welcome to join as well and shouting out players that are maybe flying a little bit under the radar with some of their performances in the minor leagues of late. There's a couple of quick news items to get to. Dylan Hyde and Isaac De Leon were promoted from Delmarva to Aberdeen today. Hyde struck out 43 batters in 34 2/3 innings before his promotion to High A. De Leon, meanwhile, has been coming on strong in the second half and has maintained a high walk rate in the Shorebirds lineup all season at just 20 years old. Jackson Holliday got into 4 games last week and hit his first professional home run, all the while walking 6 times to striking out once in 17 plate appearances. And the FCL and DSL seasons wrap up this week, so we might be seeing some more moves from the FCL to Delmarva here soon, perhaps including Holliday. But I'll jump in now to the final segment. I'm going to start with Bob here, who has a name that we have not seen at the high levels of the minors in a while for his hitter.
Well, first off, I want to shout out Isaac De Leon because, that was a guy when Kobe Perez said, we're looking at some guys that can repeat Delmarva next year and really break out in a big way. And the first name that came to my mind was De Leon because he had a high walk rate and just seemed like he was on the verge of breaking out a little bit. But no, instead he comes out strong in the second half and forces his way to Aberdeen even before this year. And so good for him on that. And yeah, my hitter this week is going to be a guy who was demoted from AA to the FCL not too long ago, but I think that was more just due to an injury where he could bat but not field for a little while. But that's Adam Hall, who was promoted to AAA Norfolk a couple days ago, and he pinch ran in his first game, and then he went 1 for 3 with a walk and a double in his first start of the season in AAA. And to me, this is just more a sign of maybe getting ready for a Gunnar Henderson promotion because he's a guy that can play second base, a little infield, outfield with Kyle Stowers being up. But nice to see him get that opportunity after, being one of the better prospects in a previous regime when Mike Elias came in and then struggling so much last season in high A, but he's had a good year despite some hiccups on the injury front, and just good to see him break out a little bit. And my pitcher is going to be Ryan Long, who I feel like is a guy that's been in the mix at Delmarva all year, starting some games, coming in relief some games, but going a little bit under the radar, where he's got a 3.00 ERA over 63 innings with 65 strikeouts. Walks a little too many guys, but hasn't given up barely any home runs this season. And he had a really good week this past week, so I just figured I'd shout him out as another pitcher that is in the mix to at least be a decent relief prospect down the line.
My guys, real quick, I'm going to Aberdeen for all of my guys here. Billy Cook, he homered in back-to-back games this past week, hit 300 with a 973 OPS, which is pretty huge considering his OPSs in previous months were 648, 687, 585, and 692. But we know the power and overall athleticism is there. He can play. I think he's played just about every position there is this year or since he was drafted. So good to see him finish strong. Hopefully earn a look at Bowie next season. But and the pitchers, two more bullpen guys. I went Bowie bullpen last week. Great run they had. This week it's Aberdeen's bullpen. Daniel Fetterman had 4 innings, no earned runs last week, no walks, 5 strikeouts. He's got 23 strikeouts and just 4 walks since being promoted to Aberdeen. And then also Daniel Lloyd's another name that I'm going to, because I have this weird obsession, as many of you know, with minor league relievers, that I'm excited to dive into a little bit more because he pitched 4 innings last week, no earned runs, 1 hit, no walks, 6 strikeouts. He's got 32 2/3 innings with Aberdeen this season, 41 strikeouts, just 9 walks. Just turned 22 a few days ago, and he's having a pretty solid year. 14th round pick out of South Carolina last year. So good to see him finish strong this year.
Good week for the Daniels.
I'm going to go down to the DSL for my hitter this week. Edwin Amparo hit his first 2 home runs of the season on back-to-back days and has been on fire in the month of August. 59 plate appearances across 15 games. He's batting .370 with a 1.016 OPS. This was one of the prized pickups for the Orioles in the international free agent class back in January. He did struggle for the first couple of months down in the DSL, but really lighting it up over the final month down there at just 17 years old. Getting a better feeling we'll see him stateside next year, and certainly looking forward to that. And then pitchers, going with Justin Armbruster. It's an easy choice, but I feel like it's the right choice. He struck out Giancarlo Stanton twice as part of a very good start against Somerset last week. And my favorite stat with Armbruster, he's now walked just 26 batters in 99 1/3 innings pitched this season while striking out 108. And at Bowie, he's pitched 45 2/3 innings and walked only 8 batters. So that command has gotten sharper as the year has gone on. And looking at I think a definite pitcher of the year candidate in Armbruster. And Andy, I'll turn it over to you. Anyone in the minor leagues kind of on your radar right now that maybe doesn't get talked about enough?
You guys throwing all these fancy stats on me. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. But honestly, like Cole Uvala is a guy that I've seen. Obviously, he's not the prospect material. He's an older guy. He's been around in the minors. But I feel like he's one of those relief arms that we're going to see sooner rather than later. If he can find his way on the 40-man next year, he's pitching great overall. That's kind of one of the names that sticks out to me. He's close. I wouldn't be shocked if he could make it. I think I'm interested in Shane Fontana. He hasn't really played all that great in AAA since he's come up, but it's a big learning curve. But those 2 names kind of stick out to me. I feel like Shane gets lost in a prospect laden outfield, and it's kind of, I'll be interested to see what he could kind of grow into. But yeah, those are I don't have any fancy stats for you guys. There's 2 names for me.
That's a good shout, though. I mean, Fontana, I think he hit his first AAA home run this past week, so he's got some tools. He's got some tools for sure.
Definitely. And Andy, we thank you for coming on tonight. We really appreciate your insight. We know we can find your work at the Baltimore Sun, but can you tell our listeners where they can find you on Twitter and what they can expect from you and Nathan Ruiz between now and the end of this season?
Yeah, you can expect a lot of articles. There's do a teaser. Nathan has a story on Chase McDermott and Kay Povich, I think in the pipeline, which would be a very fascinating one. He's also got a deep dive, hopefully, we'll see, how it all comes together. But hopefully a deep dive coming soon on the pitching staff as in the literally the staff members, not the pitchers themselves in for the O's. So that'll be very fascinating, talking about Chris Holt and some of the other guys more behind the scenes that have done a great job. And I have a piece coming out soon on a new tradition in the Orioles clubhouse. It has not been really talked about yet. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. It involves a belt of some sort. So, that's the teaser. You can, BaltimoreSun.com/sports is where you can find all our stuff. And Andy Kuska at AFKOSTKA on Twitter is a very boring Twitter, but just go to Baltimore Sun and subscribe, please. That'd be nice.
This, I just have to say before we go, this Orioles clubhouse sounds like a raging club that I'm getting too old for clubs, but I want to check this out now.
Yeah. And I got to say, the work you and Nathan Reeves have been doing at the Sun is definitely worth subscribing for. You guys are killing it on the beat.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, and thank you to Andy for coming on tonight. In addition to checking out the Baltimore Sun, which you definitely should do, head over to BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com for our latest work and work from our fellow writers on the site covering the Orioles, Ravens, and much more. And while you're there, be sure to hop on the message board and join a discussion with fellow readers of the site as well as contributors. And then follow us on Twitter at BSL on the Verge for all the latest news in the Orioles minor leagues. We will be back with a new show next week. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, thank you to Andy Koska for making this appearance. This is Zach Spedden you've been listening to on The Verge.